Aloha, I'm so nervous, you guys. Aloha I hui. Welcome to School Transformation, School Gardens, I think is what it is in the program. I'm Kat Chang. Hello, everyone. And we have an exciting panel of speakers today, followed by a Q&A. So if you're interested in really grilling us, stick around. I wanted to start with a welcome. And this is in my native Hawaiian. You may have noticed that this conference we've taken over, and it's awesome. Ona i kahala, me ka lohua, I hale lehua. No ya, no ka noi, I ka u, no ya. I a noi nei, ho'oi Tahiti mai. That's, if you came from Tahiti, by the way, welcome. Ahiki mai no oi, ahiki pu no me ke aloha. Aloha e, aloha e, aloha e. Aloha. Our first speaker today doesn't come from Hawaii, but comes from North Bay area. We're well represented today in the Bay Area. Carrie Strohl, Dr. Carrie Strohl, is the founder and leader of the School Garden Doctor, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering teachers, schools, and communities to grow. As a social science researcher, she investigates outdoor, environmental, and garden-based science learning and offers program evaluation support to conservation-focused organizations. Big welcome to Carrie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Take a look around and just see how many people are here. These are the diehards, right? Anyone here who's worked in a school garden, let me set my timer, knows it's not for the faint of heart. There are many challenges involved. And across all the sessions I attended yesterday, I saw the most amazing, inspiring stories. And I want to do a quick disclaimer. This is not that story. There will be some inspiring moments, but this is not that story because as a researcher, I'm telling the story as it was told to me, right? So I'm representing a story told by 4 individuals connected through their passion for schools, plants, gardens, and garden-based education. So let's start with a quick little energizer. I'm an educator first and foremost, before a social scientist, before a researcher. But nurtured a small native plant fetish on the side. But if you are able to stand, I'm going to ask you to stand if you apply to this descriptor. If your body's not allowing you to stand today, just raise the roof. So let's stand if you went to school. Okay, that fits. Stay standing if your school had a school garden. All right, look around. What do you notice? Okay, very few, right?
Well, they're all under 52.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. All right, and let's stand. Stay standing if you have children. If not, you can sit. And if you have children, you can stand or stay standing. Okay, how many of their schools have gardens? Okay, a few, right? Okay, thank you. You can all all sit down now and just kind of like see what that felt like to be in the minority of experience that children have at school, right? Not a lot of children have the opportunity to engage in science learning, outdoor exploration, nature connection in ways that a school garden can provide. And in this talk, I'm going to share a couple of the reasons why that is. My day job is I'm a lecturer in science education. I teach teachers how to teach science. So my way of doing that, of like embedding that, is to say, okay, every time we have to do some outdoor education so that they're not afraid to take kids outside, because that's just one of the many barriers. So as Catherine introduced, the School Garden Doctor is a small, volunteer-led organization. I call this my side hustle. Just like my entry into school gardens was a side hustle. In 2010, I started a doctoral program at UC Davis, go Aggies, and I took a job in a school garden for money, because when you're in graduate school, they're like, yeah, no, you're not supposed to work a lot. The academic is your work. I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm working stock, I have to work. So I took a job, and I was paid by a parent club that raised the amount of money that 10% of their budget could pay a garden educator stipend. So at the end of the day, that was $60,000 to $70,000 that this parent club was raising. That's the equivalent of one FTE in a school, right? And by the end of the year, I thought, it was wonderful. I thought it was amazing that someone paid me to play in the dirt with kids 3 mornings a week. That was phenomenal. It was more stress relief than anything. The money was sort of like ancillary extra, like, wow, this is amazing. But then I started to realize that there's a real equity issue involved in the access to and maintenance of and appropriation of school gardens. And yet school gardens have been part of public education since public education started. Right? And so it still remains this marginalized space. When I sat down with my friends and said, let's talk about native plants in school gardens, they gave me a whole list of reasons why we might include native plants in school gardens. I won't read all of these to you, but these are some of their words. And the first and foremost, a teacher of 25 years said, well, how can we not teach the history of this land? Native peoples have lived in communion with plants for millennia. We need to make sure that children understand that history and have that connection. And we heard some wonderful speakers this morning. I don't know if they're still in the room, but we heard some great speakers this morning about the pedagogy of that. But why it doesn't exist are some of these reasons here, right? The politics of school governance, and what that means for who doesn't get access to school gardens. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I gathered these stories, and then share with you 4 empowerment narratives, ways that we are sort of trying to shift the allocation of resources. So we think about empowerment in some ways sort of theoretically. Those of you who were here in the earlier session know that the language we attach to concepts stays with us and may mean different things for different people. So I'm going to bring the social science perspective and share that with you as well. So what about the politics of school? How many people knew that if a principal of a school wants to change anything that the district has allocated for that school, they most likely have to go through a bureaucratic process of filling out some paperwork? I see some vehement nodding in the background, right? Like, oh man, of course, don't I ever. You've maybe been in this position before. I forgot to ask, are there any principals or teachers in the room, right? Oh, yes, there you are. Thank you for coming. And so when this principal fills out this voluntary site improvement form, they are making a commitment to then maintain that site as well without any labor resources from the school district. What that means is that it's going to fall on parents, who we all know are wonderful, well-intentioned, but also age out of schools, right? Their kids grow up. That's what they're intended to do. And so they move on. And so those volunteers aren't always available. In addition, especially post-pandemic, we have seen a large, at least where I am coming from in Napa County, a large influx of gatekeeping mechanisms, right? New processes for vetting volunteers, requiring fingerprinting, for example, just to go on a field trip, installing security fencing. So literally, we cannot get into the spaces that we have curated as community members. And that's just the start of it, right? We also have groundskeeping practices, right? The sort of mow and blow we describe, right? The sort of hedging in little cubes and spheres of plants, lawn mowing, things that don't make sense to biodiversity and nature, but make sense when we are promoting conformity and uniformity, budgetary constraints, knowledge gaps. These are just some of the barriers, but we don't want to spend the whole time talking about the things we know exist as limitations. So I want to share instead a methodology. So as a social scientist, I use qualitative methods, and this particular talk is grounded in the social science methodology of ethnographic storytelling. And because both the mission of the nonprofit as well as the theoretical lens that I take is grounded in empowerment, that means that I myself was a participant in the story as well. And so I, rather than positioning myself as the interviewer, right, the one trying to get the knowledge from other people, I was in conversation with all the other people. These are people that I've known over many years participating in school garden work. My friend Arlene, we knew each other as master gardeners, and for 5 years we led a school garden task force, an arm of the UC Master Gardeners to try and, increase the knowledge resources that teachers had access to around how to grow, right, just horticultural resources. And then some various teachers. John and Chris are both teachers at various schools. And we all know each other. And so these stories were recorded in a social setting, sitting around, just chatting about native plants and their value to school gardens. And so these are the 4 stories: an oak woodland, a water feature, a pocket garden, and a pollinator habitat. And I think, Arlene starts out by positioning ourselves as co-narrators here. She says, I met John at Browns Valley, that's the name of a school, when he was trying to valiantly grow vegetables in the shade because the principal didn't quite get it. Right? So right away, we're positioning the principals as not able to meet the demand that a school garden required. And so here's that oak woodland. The arrow is showing where the original school garden was placed on that campus. And you can see from the rectangle boxes, those are the lawns that are going, pretty much brown, before brown was the new green, right? This was 2014, and they're just drought-stricken, underutilized, right, but yet maintained. You see all the school buildings. So the school garden is the farthest possible amount of space, right, away from the entrance of the school. And John was trying to move the garden from outside of that space because in the time since the garden was started, the oak riparian habitat had grown up. And so he sent me an email. I was a master gardener at the time. He sent me an email and said, yeah, we're thinking about cutting back some of the oaks. Right? I had to take a step back and a couple of deep breaths, and I wrote him a long, honest email, just explaining, in trying not to invoke my paternalism, but saying basically, oaks, they're keystone species. They're already threatened by sudden oak death. Like, there are so many reasons why you don't want to mess with those trees. And he wrote back, and this is another form of the methodology here is that I use discourse analysis, right? So I'm looking for key phrases, key language that we're using to unpack this narrative. He says, I agree. I love your honesty. The oak trees are incredible. But I'm facing resistance with moving the garden. So what choices do I have, right? The sod lawns take tremendous amounts of water. They're not even utilized that much, but pushback from parents who were here before and had a vested interest, right? In that garden located near the creek with oaks. The principal agreed with me, but since I've been told to cease and desist. So I started planting sunflowers on the fence row near the entrance of the school, and that's been a hit. Right, so he's trying to garner support here. And the current garden should become a place of reflection or even a native plant garden, right? So this kind of idea is planted. So we'll come back to John's story a little bit later. I was working at a school with a school garden that was pretty well established, and in that school garden, we had a water feature. But in this space, and this is again, the garden is like on the edge of the campus, but at least visible from the street this time. And this water feature was installed as a focal point, and it had some infrastructure for irrigation, but several attempts couldn't make it work. I found irrigation specialists working in vineyards to come and try to help us, right? Those parent resources who have the knowledge. And we couldn't get it worked, and so instead I replanted the perimeter with Seaside and Santa Barbara daisy. And again, during COVID, we were locked out of our gardens, not able to access our gardens, and because not a lot of people know what happens when native plants go dormant, the plants were all ripped out because they thought they were just dead. So we have a resource situation. Chris talked about the pocket gardens that he hopes to create. And when I talked earlier about that school garden gig I took as a side hustle, it was at this campus in 2010. And now today, Chris, a friend of mine, he's working at this campus. And you can see the sort of outline or skeletal outline here on the bottom of the raised garden beds. That's the remnants of what was left in place, because in this particular situation, due to things like declining enrollment, as well as schools being built on old infrastructure, in Napa County there was a school built on a fault line, and so the campus he works for had moved locations 4 times. This was their 4th move, and they moved to this location when the small school was closed 2 years prior. And the vacating campus decided, well, we're going to take our garden infrastructure with us. So they took apart the beds and took them to another location. And he was sort of essentially, and he had actually built those because he worked at that school too. And he was starting over in a lot of different ways, right? But this is the resilience of school gardens and school garden educators. So he did, and instead he applied for some funding or some plant material from the Xerces Society, and he was awarded this kit, this garden kit. It has 32 herbaceous plants, and all natives, to cover approximately 500 square feet. So, he's rethinking the way that he is doing this. And the way this came about is the 4th narrative here, that the local RCD, our Resource Conservation District, emailed me this opportunity from Xerces, and they were so excited. They said, hey, there's these great garden kits being given away. We think this would be a great fit for school garden educators. And I took a look at them and I said, yeah, no, like that, it's an application process. It takes time to submit the application. You don't know when the plants are going to come in. You're supposed to drive to the Central Valley to pick them up, and then you have to plan and organize a workday on a campus where no volunteers are able to access. I mean, I just went through the list kind of gently with them and said, there are too many barriers. And they said, oh, we didn't realize, right? So we have to think about when our various goals and aims are potentially in opposition with each other. And schools are these complex places where, the public has a right to have access to them. At the end, I'm going to ask you a question that helps remind you of why that is. But yet, schools' primary function is to prepare students for society, and there is no line item for plants in the budgets, right? So if we want schools to mirror society, then we have to, we could summarize the barriers all day, but we have to look at other ways to get around this, right? So how do we look at the empowerment part? So Arlene says, the problem with native plants is people think they don't need water and they don't need maintenance, and neither of those is true. And we know that, right? The plant nerds here in this room know this is not entirely true. But when I asked them, okay, well, then beyond partnering with the local native plant chapter, what other recommendations do you have for how to make natives more approachable in the school landscape? I was met with 30 full seconds of silence, right? And that is golden. That was data, right? I was like, wow, if nothing comes to mind immediately, that's telling us something, right? Like you have been trying to beat the odds here. And that, again, is where empowerment theory comes in. So when we think about empowerment theory, right, what we're trying to do is achieve this intentional process, right? An intentional ongoing process, right? Every decision we make is influenced by this type of thinking, centered in the local community, involving mutual respect, critical reflection, caring, and group participation through which people lacking an equal share of valued resources gain greater access to control over those resources. Okay, so when we talk about equity work, what we really need to look at is what are the resources everyone needs, and what are the resources we are all competing for? And then how do we allocate those in the places that achieve what we want to achieve? So what are the valued resources at stake? And that's where methodology comes in. So I audio recorded our conversation. After years of being involved in this firsthand, I audio recorded our conversation, transcribed, and then analyzed what are the things that came up repeatedly, and those become my categories, right? And so these are some of the valued resources at stake. Land area, water, labor, permission, plants, and knowledge. And so I'm going to talk through each one, just super briefly show you. What valued resources were at stake in John's Oak Woodland? Every single one of them, right? That's why I shared that long narrative email. He wasn't in the right land area. He couldn't get permission to move to a different land area. He didn't have the right water he needed. He couldn't source the plants in a way that was timely necessarily, although Arlene did help and use her connection to the native plant chapter, a personal connection. Napa's a small town, and was able to set up a really lovely garden there. But again, with COVID, wasn't able to access it to maintain it. So there was labor resources, who do we get to help and engage in this work? And then how do we convince people that this is the sort of right path to go on, right? And so as we were talking, John said, you remember when we started talking about cutting trees down? I remember talking to Carrie about it, so I'm there with him, and he's telling the others and invoking me, saying, getting some in there. Carrie was not real happy, right? So when we think about what can we do as individuals, we can share what we know to be best practices in native plant management, just in case other people hadn't maybe thought of it through the perspective of the plants and the habitat, right? We have some splendid oaks out there on the creek. So what I called John's form of empowerment was protest, right? He was protesting. He said, yeah, I'm not going to accept that the school, the parents, the budget, the district, they're not letting me do this thing. I'm going to find a way to do it. And he planted those sunflowers, and ever since then, everyone's been like, yeah, plant those sunflowers every year. And then eventually their vegetable garden was moved to that space, a full sun space with access to irrigation. And then leaving the oak woodland as it is and converting it to a native plant garden with stumps and rocks that kids can turn over and all those things, right? All the fun things. Yeah, I know, it's exciting, right? I know, maybe I lied a little. I said there wouldn't be any inspiration. There's a little inspiration. What valued resources were at stake in the garden that I was working at, Pueblo Vista, the water feature, right? So we had the land area. I had permission to access it. I knew what plants to get. But I couldn't get the water quite right, and I didn't have the people to help. I mean, I had people, but none of us could figure it out, and we couldn't pass on that knowledge so that people knew not to pull those plants out when they went dormant. And so for me, it really is about sustaining as a form of empowerment, trying to reduce the amount of resources that we're using, reduce the water resource, reduce the time and labor resource by having plants that don't require 3 turns a year like a vegetable garden bed does. So we had some pretty lovely native plants. These are, again, my words, at Pueblo Vista. But one day, the groundskeeper cut the shrubs at the fence line. So, if you do get help, when we weren't allowed to access the schools for COVID, school district personnel just went in and started cutting everything down because it looks messy to them, right? It doesn't match their aesthetic. What about Chris and his campus, right? He had almost everything he needed to restart. I mean, he also had the will, right? He was kind of being like a phoenix in that situation. But he no longer had all the land area that he used to have. So he was resorting to these pocket gardens, right? 10 by 10 little plots throughout the school grounds. And for him, that was a form of adapting as empowerment. So he says, we have these giant, largely unused fields, but the district holds so tightly to that. to the idea that a native plant garden has to be one central 50 by 20 or whatever size location. But the idea of a pocket garden, where we could have these little 10 by 10s that are just kind of interspersed throughout, while they're not maintenance-free entirely, it could be better utilized. And then what valued resources are at stake when a conservation agency offers support? I would say that's when the real conversation starts, right? That we need these partnerships to exist with organizations that are willing to see how their own perception of what conservation looks like is not necessarily realistic for a school campus because of the politics of school governance, because of the way schools run. But with their help, with their assistance, we can reimagine those landscapes as places of empowerment, right? We can think about what is the purpose of schooling, right? And in my field, we talk a lot about the difference between schooling and education, right? Schooling is what happens within the four walls and the confines of the system that has been designed for a certain purpose, right? Let's be real clear about and real about that. Just like our food system was designed for a certain purpose, largely efficiency, right? When we put things into industrial scale, we lose out on a lot of the ancillary benefits that humanize students, right? So when we think about education, what plant-based and nature-based and environmentally based things bring, what are the implications of that? And so I think we have to think about what are we offering to kids? And this is part of our conversation as well. So if kids are not well fed, and if they don't feel right in their bodies, which after the last 2 years, I walk into classrooms every week and I see teachers competing for kids' attention with their large screen, right, Promethean boards showing videos and songs and all the things because we've been inundated with these screens for a couple of years now. So this real lack of opportunity to be able to, and it is an opportunity gap, right? It can exist. It's just, do we have the will to make it happen, right? If kids don't feel right in their bodies and minds, they're not going to learn anyway, right? We know this from science. The frontal lobe, when in a stress, fight or flight response, isn't able to pay attention, isn't able to organize our executive functions. We have to feel right in that space. But if you can learn to sit in relative quiet, in nature for just a few minutes each day, right? We'd all be a lot better off. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but can we create quiet spaces outside for kids to chill, to develop the social emotional skills and awareness that they need? Can that transform the learning landscape? Can we change the surroundings we immerse kids in ways that promote curiosity and focus their attention? At risk of being redundant here, two presenters this morning quoted Robin Wall Kimmerer, but I'm going to invoke her wisdom again because it's just so good, right? She talks about the least we can do is pay attention to the gifts that nature brings us, right? The least we can do. And I think that that's true here as well. And if we nurture the human connection to native plants, right, we have the potential to restore balance in these overlapping systems, the ecosystem, the school system. And then there's some practical considerations too. John says, after tearing up the irrigation systems, right, needing repair from the school district a couple of times, he had the school district's attention. And so he says, we're watering these huge lawns. We'd use so much less water. So let's come to consensus around how we're using these valued resources, using a native plant garden. And Chris says the same thing. School gardens don't have to be one central plot relegated to the shadiest, crummiest part of the campus, the areas of bark and weeds, right? To him, it feels pretty simple. And so when we think of planting empowerment, right, we're thinking about these valued resources and how do we make these valued resources more equitable, and how do we invite others to join us in this conversation? So I'm going to leave that there for a moment, and I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm going to ask you to stand if this applies to you. Stand if you're able, or raise the roof if you're not able to stand in your body today. Stand if you live in a municipality where you contribute to state and local taxes. Okay, so we are all stakeholders, right? Schools are publicly funded entities. So we all have an opportunity to use our voice, to advocate. I love how people are taking a stretch break. Go for it, right? So that's kind of the closing part, finding out what are the valued resources at stake in the location where you live. What are the barriers? What prevents people, schools, districts, teachers, outside organizations from coming together? These goals don't have to be in opposition, but you can have a say in that as well. And so I'm so excited for you to hear the inspiring stories of how school gardens can be used, especially interaction with native plants from Rose, and then how bond measures can actually, partly how bond measures and design can help close these gaps as well. So I want to say thank you, and do your little dance and stretch, and we're going to turn it over. I think we said we'll take all our questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Our next speaker is Rose Hammock, and I'm so excited to introduce her. She actually is going to give a greater introduction to herself, so I'll keep this brief. Rose Hammock is Pomo, Wailacki, and Maidu, and is a enrolled tribal member with the Round Valley Indian tribes. Recent recipient of the 2022 North Bay Spirit Award from the Press Democrat, she currently serves as the secretary for the Yaka'ama Board. A traditional dancer, Rose travels up and down California sharing songs, dance, and prayer. Through traditional dance, she has had the honor of learning many things from her elders: basket weaving, beading, sewing, language, and plant knowledge. With what she has learned, she feels it is her turn to pass on the knowledge to the next generation. We are very lucky to hear about one of her many projects that she's involved with today.
This is me with some of my baskets, and as Native people, we do a lot of storytelling. That's how we share. We didn't have written language. We didn't write down our stories. Everything was told through oral tradition, much like a lot of our relatives here that are out in the crowd. You may hear that similar story across your community. So like I was mentioned in my introduction, I am a traditional dancer. My dad here in the front seat has made much of my regalia that I dance with, from the feather work to the beadwork, and even my beadwork today. I also like to highlight the red handprints you see. If you're not familiar, I hope you get familiar with the movement around missing and murdered Indigenous women. It is an epidemic that has been happening to Native and Indigenous women for many generations. This is not something new, and it is a problem in our community. And so I consider myself a community advocate. I attend many of the marches and talks that happen. And also, as mentioned, I'm a basket weaver. I'm very new, but I'm taking that step to try to learn that part of our traditions and pass it on to the next generation. So to share a little bit about my previous work I was doing with a group of women. It's a national movement called Big Picture Learning, and we had a group specifically that we called the Native American Initiative. Myself and my teacher, Buffy, right next to me with the little white overcoat. Buffy's from Yokeo and Sherwood Valley, and she's also Noyo from Fort Bragg. She's been a big language and basket teacher for me, and so together we went into a lot of the schools and were able to start to teach why it's important for people to know about native plants, but it should be coming from native people. There's a real big difference when someone is planting our medicine, like angelica root and sage and mugwort, and they don't have any cultural context. And then when it comes to gathering those plants and burning them, there's a real big difference of understanding the do's and don'ts of what to do. As Native people, we have a lot of protocol that go along with what we can and can't do at different times. I'll share, especially as our women, teaching a lot of our young girls, when we are on our monthly time, we refer to that as our kela, or our moon time. We don't go and touch the plants. We're on our own ceremony during that time. And so teaching, even though a majority of the people I was able to teach were non-Indigenous and non-Native, it's still that knowledge that they need to know about our ways and how we respect our plants. And so we got to do that a little bit. As you can see, this big circle is all of my youth I had in 2 schools. I started teaching with about 9 or 10 kids, and I ended up teaching about 150 youth in total over Zoom. We were basket weaving on Zoom, we were doing beadwork on Zoom, and we were doing plant identification on Zoom. And when we were able to meet in person, just like I shared a song, I was able to do that, and I was able to burn medicine. And a lot of these kids have been working 2-3 years on learning about our plants and got to smell the plants when we burn them. We brought traditional food so they could taste our food. We took them on lots of different trips that followed up from this. I brought materials so they could learn how to basket weave in person with me, with assistance. And this is my group of kids. I don't work there no more, but they all still talk to me a lot. Lots of questions. The questions never stop. And I just wanted to share a few pictures from one of our field trips. This is the Cal Flora Nursery in Fulton. And this is one of our closest nurseries that hold a lot of our traditional plants. And we have a really good partnership with them that if we are ever in need of plants for our students, they actually let us come and get plants for free. And so that's a big deal, especially for a person like myself. I can go and say, well, I want to grow my medicine at home, and I'm able to go and get plants for free. And I try to take it upon myself to take advantage of that and give plants out to the Native people in my community, because it's important for us to regain those connections, because for many generations that knowledge was taken from us. We didn't have the opportunity to sit with all of our elders and learn from them. And so it's up to us as the young generation. I'm not that young, but it's important that we take that upon ourselves and we take it serious, because we have that knowledge and we need to run with it and we need to pass it on to the next generation. And for myself, as a young person, I spent a lot of time with elders in my family and in my community. I've taken that knowledge and I'm passing it forward, regardless if it's in my own community or outside, because if you really want to learn about our plants and learn about our culture, it better come from us and not someone outside of the community. We are sovereign. We have that inherent right to speak for ourselves and share our stories. We're not long lost people, and many of my relatives are out here in the audience, and so we're here, and we have that knowledge to share, and so why not have it right from the source? So these are some of the plants that, also I have a camera I used to take on the walks with our students, and so a lot of these pictures are from my kids. They all gave me permission to share. So we see turkey tail mushroom, our mugwort, our elderberry, our acorn. And so besides just plant ID, we're also able to teach them how to gather and teach them how to process. So I did workshops with elderberry for about a month. We made elderberry syrup, we had elderberry tea. We were fortunate not to have acorn mush, that's a long process, but we were able to bake acorn bread on campus, which was really cool. I got some ideas from the dinner, got to try some acorn tortillas soon. Want to try that out. And also mugwort is another plant that we use for tea and other medicinal purposes. And I was talking with someone in the audience yesterday at another talk that a lot of our plants, although they are traditional for us, anybody can have these foods. just knowing the right protocol around how to gather, and knowing that you're not taking people out to gather acorn or elderberry or anything like that, but for your personal use, these are foods that all of us can eat for our health and for our wellness. So a few more things, taking the students out to gather acorn and also to gather the pine cones with our protocol, so similar to what I shared already, and teaching the kids the hard way. A long time ago, we didn't have things to protect our hands when we took apart pine cones, and so a lot of the kids, got the pricks in their hand, and they're like, how'd you guys do this? I'm like, tough hands, got to build up some callus or something. And so really taking the time to sit with them, teach them how to make beadwork. And so we got to go out and gather acorn and gather the pine cones. We brought them back into the classroom. We took everything apart. And then I have a Dremel because me and my dad do abalone work. And so I was able to show them how we drill holes in the pine nuts and how we could drill holes in the acorn tops. And all of my I had about 30 students that day, and so every student left with either a bracelet, necklace, or earrings, and so they were able to see how we process and how we gather, and how these are still things that we do today. A lot of us still do these things, and so it was really fun to have that experience with the youth. And just some more pictures, really encouraging our students to understand how to identify things. These are pictures that I took recently, just some of my favorite walks I like. And it's been really good to get interest from the students, hearing how I could send a student a picture in a text and say, what is this? And zoom in, what is this and what is that? And even to the point where I could take a picture of some of my jewelry and tell me what is all the plants that is used here? How did we process? What's the protocol? And the students remember. Sometimes on Zoom it was tricky because you just see a black box, so you're like, are you taking a nap or are you listening? Can't tell sometimes, but to hear them recall what we have taught them, and in a respectful way, they really have taken the information and understand it. And for my Native students in my classes, although there were a few, all of my Native students for their senior projects got to make regalia. And if you're not familiar with what regalia is, it's our traditional clothing for dance. So our young boys got to work on hair stick and horns for when they dance. Our young girls got to sew dresses and make jewelry, and that was their senior project. And these were things that they wore when they graduated last year. And so this year, although I don't longer work there, we'll be going back to the school to mentor my little cousin, Ricky, who is our new person who's going to be working in the garden with them. And for us, it's very important that we have leadership from our men in our community. Although a lot of people associate us with our women being basket weavers, our men were also basket weavers, and so being able to pass those teachings to all of our youth and have them carry it forward. Our future is in our young people, and for me, I read a quote when my mom passed away back in 2018 that when elders pass away, it's like a library burning down. All their knowledge that they held is gone. And so it's very important that we take this knowledge serious and we practice it. I'm 26, and I hope that when I'm an elder, I have knowledge to continue to push out to the community and continue to push out to people, because we have to remember that wherever we're coming from, our knowledge is our power, and we can't be greedy with that knowledge. It's meant to share. Our elders, we have elders like Mabel McKay, who were very world-renowned basket weavers, and they would go to the county fair and teach people how to basket weave because they knew that knowledge needed to get out there. And so when it comes to our plants, it's the same thing. If you're a person out there who runs a land stewardship, or you work with water agencies, or you work in a garden, you're a school person working in a garden, you have knowledge of these plants that you can pass forward. And it could be the science aspect or a cultural aspect, but all of that knowledge is power, and it's important. And so that's that's what I got today. Thank you.
Rose is traveling right after this, so there's a little bit of time for Q&A for Rose, and then after Maru and I present, we'll have Q&A for us and Carrie. Any questions for Rose?
My name is Chang and Maru, and I created a Hello, my name is James Alvarado, and I come from Fresno, and we created a peace garden at the school that I teach, and we have 2 white sage. And I wanted to know what is the proper way of pruning them, because every so often, sometimes they'll come in when they closed because of COVID, they came in and they pruned everything out, and it was like, well, they didn't know, but what is the proper way of pruning sage?
Mm-hmm. So, I grow white sage at home. I forgot to mention all my protocol myself to introduce my grandparents, but so again, Pomo, Wailacki, and Maidu from here, but my grandma's people are from up in northern Oregon, and my mom's people are indigenous from Mexico and Nicaragua, and my grandma's people up in Oregon utilize the white sage for their medicine, and I was taught just how we're supposed to harvest our tobacco is to clip the leaves right at the stalk. That's how I gather personally. I know many people have their own methods, but I would say since you're in Fresno, there's a very good group of Native youth who I think should be involved in that process if you're able to reach out to them. Yeah. Involve the local Native community wherever you're at.
That's actually my question. What's the best way to involve and reach out to the Native community around your school? For example, I'm in Berkeley. What would be the appropriate protocol for that?
I will share, depending on the area, just some common knowledge I hope that everybody could walk away with is that tribes operate like a government. We have internal things that we take care of for our people, and so you can't reach out to a tribe once and expect us to show up because we have many jobs. We have many things that we're trying to accomplish for our people, and depending on who is available, sometimes tribes just don't have the capacity. So I would say if you are reaching out, don't give up on the first or second try. It might take 30 tries, but keep doing it because making that effort towards wanting us to be there is needed and it's important. And don't forget our unfederally recognized tribes. Just because a tribe isn't federally recognized doesn't mean their voice doesn't matter or doesn't have clout. There's still people that are here, have been here, and will continue to be here, and their voices need to be included. I know for anybody here from the Bay Area, a lot of the tribes there are unfederally recognized, and there are many tribes that are fighting for federal recognition. That's a way that you could support, is by uplifting those people who don't have their recognition to be involved and to write letters of support. Because a tribe, if anybody's not familiar, if you're not federally recognized, you don't have access to the same resources that a federally recognized tribe has. You don't have land, and they make it extremely difficult to establish yourself as a tribe. And so I would say, depending on your area, just do the research. It's a lot of your time you need to put into it and your effort you need to put into it, but you need to be aware of whose land you live on and whose land you occupy. And if you do have native plants, let the local native people know, because that can give them access to their medicine that they need for ceremony, that access to land that they have not had for a long time. And partnerships can turn into friendships, you know, when that trust is being built. And so I would recommend just doing your part, reaching out to the tribes and continuing to do that. If you're not hearing a response, if you are hearing a response, just make sure that you're continuing to make that effort.
Hello, I have two questions. What plants are you wearing, and does your dad sell? Could you hear me?
I couldn't hear you,
Oh,
sorry.
What plants are you wearing today, and does your dad sell?
My dad does sell beadwork. He doesn't have a website, but he is in high demand. You can contact me, but my necklace is all pine nuts on the bottom, and then the shiny parts is abalone, and then my earrings are also abalone. And so we're not a coastal tribe, we're more inland as Pomo people, but our coast Pomo relatives live right along the ocean, and so we still have a lot of times where we trade material, food material, things for jewelry, our basketry. Yeah. Oh, there's more.
You said that we could get in contact with you. Can you share your contact information or an email or something, please?
It's not professional, but you could follow me on Facebook and
Amazing.
Instagram.
Perfect. Thank you.
No, I could provide my email at a later time, but still you could follow me.
Hi, thank you for sharing that song with us at the beginning. I wanted to know, is it better to, in your opinion, is it better to abstain from planting sacred plants in our gardens? And if so, how can we access a list of those?
Well, I'm up here, so I will give my own opinion. I will say everything I share is for me, it's from me, it's my story, my perspective, so I don't want to say all of our people agree, but I think it's very important, like what was shared in a talk on Friday, was that plants like white root, which is a traditional plant, is also very integral for structure along water because the roots run so deep. And so I would say don't steer away from including native plants, but I would definitely say if there's plants like mugwort, for example, that's a traditional plant, making sure that you're giving access to those plants from the native community. Especially if you don't know how to tend to those plants. There's many people within our community that could help with tending and gathering at different points. Yeah.
So you were talking about how Native people can come in, and I'm a school teacher, and I have a considerable amount of Native plants in my school, and I would love for a Native person to come in, but I have 15 classes. So what's the best way of transference of knowledge? So say that person has availability for a day, then is it okay for me as the teacher to continue that education, or what would be the best sort of routine or rhythm for that?
Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's best when our traditional, you might hear this a lot in the conference, TEK, traditional ecological knowledge. I just like to say it's our people's knowledge, and so it's ancestral, it's intergenerational, and I just feel that it's best that it comes from us. There are definitely ways that people teach about our plants, but when it comes to tending and different things, I would just say continue to make space for those communities to come in and teach the students themselves, because the more that you can include Native voices in and around the plants, especially in a school garden or in a school classroom, I think is the way to go.
One last question.
Thank you. In that same thread, in asking or inviting someone into the school garden or whatever community space, hoping that they can spread that knowledge and remind people that the indigenous peoples are absolutely still here and will continue to be here. There's also the flip side of not overtaxing. Like you said, a tribe might not have availability or capacity. And so I'm wondering, I've heard this recommendation of making sure that you pay the people you're inviting in and reimburse them in monetarily or at least in some form for their time and effort and knowledge. But in community and school garden spaces, there might not be budget. So I'm wondering if you have any other suggestions off the top of your head of what might also be an acceptable exchange protocol there. Thank you.
I think it's going to depend on what community is where you're located. I would imagine that a tribe that doesn't have a land base, just being able to access the land and work with the plants will be very important and integral in what they want to grow for their own tribal community. But I will add, if there's anybody out there that is finding scheduling conflicts with trying to reach out to tribes, offer the tribe to say when they are available and work your schedule around them. If you really want our voice there and you want us to be heard, you have to be willing to work with our schedule and the 1,000 directions we get pulled in all the time. And so I would say on top of the money thing, that it's important to make sure that is key. Making sure that you're not saying, well, I have one day at this time for 1 hour and you can't do it. Well, maybe I'll ask you in a few months. Don't go into that direction. Make sure that you're saying, well, I can be open to my schedule. Why don't you and your community or your group let us know when you're available, and then we can come up with something from there. I know for the work we do now at Redbud Resource Group, we're a Native nonprofit, and a lot of the times we have 1 hour and then that's it. And if we have all these different projects we're trying to help and assist with, that puts us in a bind where we have to kind of drop projects because we don't have capacity to attend I can't sit in 10 Zoom meetings every day. Too much screen time. So just being open and willing to work and collaborate with communities and along the things of honorarium. Again, that's different for every tribe. I would like to suggest that if you are around unfederally recognized tribes or even a federally recognized tribe or a state recognized tribe, you can just write an honorarium check to the tribe and the tribe is able to use it how they see fit. That would be my suggestion. I don't see any more questions, so again, just want to say Yahui, thank you for allowing me to share, and I apologize, I do have to leave in the middle of the next speaker, but our contact people have my information if anybody would like to stay in contact and hear more about our work. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is I'm Kat Chang, and my fellow presenter.
I'm Maru Echeverria.
We work together at Madrone Design Studio. Actually, we just formally recognized that as our new business name because last names are getting a little awkward. And also, in our practice, we're very much interested in centering in culturally aware design. And part of that is our own work culture, how we bring all of the people who we work together in our team and hold them together. And last names just seem a little patriarchal.
And long. My last name is really long, so.
So we've been engaged with working with schools for quite some time, and what we were bringing to today's session is the lessons that we've learned primarily from San Francisco Unified School District's very successful bond measure that they started in 2006. And it's been through a few rounds. Those are voted, supported measures. And at this point, I apologize, we didn't do we're not totally up to date on the research, but they've done more than 200 green schoolyard conversions. And if you can imagine, in the city of San Francisco, many of these schools are over 100 years old, or certainly over 50 years old, and they may have had green space at one point, and no longer. San Francisco is a highly urbanized community, and so this represented an amazing opportunity to remove asphalt, expose the dirt to the air and the elements, and be able to get green growing things in there. Okay.
So, what is a green schoolyard? As you can see in the photo, on the left, it's a space that is completely covered in asphalt. And through this process, it is later transformed into a green space that facilitates teaching and learning. It has three main functions: recreation and fitness, teaching and learning, and gathering and community building. Schools are a social hub of the community, and whether you're a teacher, a student taking classes there, picking up or dropping off a child, this is a place to engage with the school community. It also, on the teaching spectrum, it offers the opportunities to teach the kids and the community about how this transformation helps to mitigate climate change by reducing heat islands, and it improves greater education and access to nature, and aids in health by increasing and providing space for engaging in different physical activities and adventurous play.
So most of the school communities were very, they're excited about the availability for funding to open up these asphalted areas and invite natural areas in. We've all heard through many of the presentations, both today and throughout the conference, a lot about the benefits about connecting to nature, right? And just wanted to remind everyone of this. Let's see. But what elements are really needed in those natural areas? And I think one of the, Carrie mentioned it very early on, quiet spaces are very helpful within an educational learning situation because they really allow the students to kind of slow down, that screen time that they're so used to today, and start to just kind of moderate their internal landscape, right? Creative and adventurous play, employing all those senses, all the things that we understand about nature, and allowing the students at these campuses to access that. But we're really here today to talk about how to create that and some of the lessons that we really learned. Because when we started working with SF Schoolyard, we thought, oh great, we'll get some demolition in there, and Carrie was so helpful in explaining a lot of the difficulties of it's not as easy as getting demo in there. One of the reasons why we were asked to be a part of the process is mostly to assist with the things that schools don't really want the teachers or the students or the parents to necessarily engage in some of the more dangerous aspects of installation and construction, right? So in some ways, when we first started working with SFUSD, they talked about it in terms of green schoolyards, but as we moved through doing the 7 ones that we were intimately involved with, that language changed to brown schoolyards. We started telling parents that we were providing brown schoolyards because we were looking at the infrastructure. In addition, a lot of the other items that we were looking at were things like handicap accessibility, making sure that the drainage was going to work, all of the sort of, I often will call it the sexy stuff, but it's so not sexy. A huge part of it was coming to the school communities and really actively listening, right? And so I'm going to let Maru talk a little bit more about those first steps.
So, so some of the things that we learned during this experience is that the community engagement piece to this is critically important because it allows the school community to participate, ask questions, be engaged and give their feedback and feel heard. And this is really important for them to have that experience so that they can take ownership of the schoolyard once we go through this process, because that is the ultimate goal, is that the school community takes ownership of the schoolyard once we go through the design process and the building process. As Kat mentioned, we deliver a brown schoolyard, so we give them the infrastructure and they take it from there and create the green portion of that. So in the beginning stages, it's really important to, in our experience, to have really good initial communication with the principal of each school, because each school is different, and the principal knows the school intimately, and they know and can advise of any challenges or barriers that might exist during this process for us, and they can point to people in the community, be it a teacher, a parent group, whatnot, about how they can be helpful in engaging the community and being helpful to the process of the community engagement. And oftentimes, too, they are very knowledgeable about the school community and if there are cultural and language barriers that we should be aware of so that we can plan appropriately and be able to take that into consideration during the planning process so that they can also engage in a culturally and language appropriate way. So that being said, what we do additionally during this process is we present images of sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, of items that could be potential things that could be incorporated into the schoolyard. So these are just images to help them guide them into feeling like they have a voice about contributing to what they can imagine that their schoolyard could be. So yeah, it's a tool to help them imagine what the potential is for their schoolyard and what they could have. And these images are presented during exercises during the school year, and we do it. We've done it at a variety of different times, just to be able to reach the parents that, for example, if we do it during the day, some parents work during the day and they can't make it, and so we have additional community engagement exercises in the evening or during events that are highly attended by parents. We also took care to have all of the material and questionnaires with these same images, and were translated into the languages that were spoken in the school. We tried our best to accommodate that, and those surveys were printed and sent home with the students. In addition, we created an online survey so that the parents that could not make it, or the survey got lost with a child in transit, that they could have access to that. And these boards were kept at the school so that the children, teachers, parents, and anybody else in the school community could access that and continue to provide feedback about what it was that they really like, and what it really inspired them to have in their Green Schoolyard. So this was really important in the process, because they really felt like they were part of the process and that they were being heard, and were really able to take ownership of that and move forward. So this was like a critical piece for us.
So one of the things that ended up being a difficult part of the process that it's different for every school, and that is really the age-old struggle between people who want to get in the dirt and people who don't want to get in the dirt, or more importantly, people who don't want the dirt inside the schoolrooms, right? We don't have any magic answer to that except for conversation. You have to get that community together. They got to iron it out. And it was always a fun part of the conversation. I'll say that, leave it at that. But that incorporating that feedback is really, it's in deciding those elements is how we began to create the designs that would end up ultimately being installed at each school, right? Pollinator gardens, always highly prized at many of the sites. And then going back and seeing how the students use them. We just love this photo of one of our gardens, right? They're so engaged. Also, as architects and landscape architects, we sometimes don't really get a chance to go back and take pictures after things have matured, so I apologize. The plants are tiny in here. But this also, at this particular site, natural play was really important. So we had so much fun tagging these boulders and getting them installed and getting to play with the really big machines to put them in. And then after that, the administrator the next year was like, oh my gosh, those boulders, that's a safety hazard, right? So it's interesting because you get changes in culture around this. The parent body at this particular school and the principal at this particular school, they love the boulders. And the kids, you cannot peel the kids off of them, right? Incorporation of STEM, right, and STEAM, art as well, food security. Some of the sites that we're active in, food security is very much, a priority. And then in other sites that we're in, this is actually not at SFUSD, this is in the East Bay. This particular school has lots of green space, so they can, I like their PPE that they're using right there. But they, giving them that space, and actually, if I could go back for a second, I know it doesn't look like much, and I know it's a lawn, but this is actually a historic cultural feature that the city of Oakland made us, how do I even put it? I don't know if you noticed, there's no curb on that lawn right there. And so all of this was highly worked out, highly engineered, and negotiated to make sure that the historic cultural features of the site remained in place. So sorry to show you guys lawn, but it's being really well used. And then community builds are also very, very important, right? This particular, oh, geez, I don't see any of the text. This particular build here is a food security project. The community came out. The detail for the raised beds is all about efficiency of material and getting as many beds possible with the lowest possible cost. The detail comes from the United Nations. Back to San Francisco, getting water. Oh yeah, this is all about dirt and mud in the classrooms. So this particular school, they were down for it. And then another site. This is a high school site. So another lesson to really kind of talk about with this is all the different ways that Green Schoolyards look for different age groups. All the age groups have other ways of engaging with the environment, and it's always, even age groups that are almost close in age, like 6th graders and 7th graders and 8th graders, they use these Green Schoolyards totally differently. So that's pretty fun. And this is an overview of where that vernal pool, no, excuse me, it's not a vernal pool, wetlands is at. And this is Bishop O'Dowd in the East Bay. And this garden has been there for many, many, many years. Maybe some of you guys may have been a part of it at one point. But we were asked to come back for another retrofit just to make sure that it was safe and accessible for people. So a whole new trail system within that, and trying to make sure that we kept the sacred areas for that Green Schoolyard in place. Water is such a huge part of it. Protection, to make sure that little plants don't get mowed over by ball players. I'm just moving through these really quickly so we have enough time for Q&A. Sorry, we were at the very end, but we had such great presentations. I'm so happy about them. The quiet spaces, this, you can't really see it, I'm so sorry, but
I think
there's,
slide.
is it?
Yeah, the bottom.
On the bottom right there. It's underneath a ceanothus that's really beautiful, and it's actually engineered for handicap accessibility. This particular site, they felt it was really important that wheelchair-bound children could access a quiet spot. And then continuing with accessibility, outdoor classrooms and having demonstration tables was something that teachers really wanted to see. And you can see I don't like to show too many technical details, but upper right, you can see we're really carefully making sure that all of the plumbing allows for somebody to come up in a wheelchair for that. And we kept all the plumbing exposed so that the kids could really see the pathway of water and that it was uncovered, right? And this is where that water goes. It went into a dry well, so you could hear it. You turn on the faucet, and the kids could follow it. I know it doesn't look like much, but it's such an important lesson. And this was at the high school garden. I'm not sure that this one is legal, but it's exposed, right? Another school site, fog catchers. But like I said, at the end of the day, what we found out is we were not, we were so excited about Green Schoolyards, and then we're like, oh, brown, okay. And this is some of that shovel-heavy, labor-intensive infrastructure work that, we're involved in, so that we could allow the school afterwards to come in. And this is where CNPS could be really helpful in providing expertise and providing resources like plants, maybe even other things like ideas as well. And then the other, a really important lesson for us was, what are the systems that help with the summer gap? And this is, now we have COVID gap, right? Finding those important people in the community that allow from semester to semester so that things don't disappear, like the unfortunate plants that got mowed, right? So neighbors, garden clubs, CNPS chapters, and it's really important to anticipate that parents age out, like Carrie mentioned, and the system is designed, right, for parents to age out and for the students to age out. So I know this is pretty prosaic, but having a hose bib, so every green schoolyard, they wanted the water right there so that they could help with establishing plants. And you can see where the students can coil the hose and everything. But what we learned is we needed to add a second hose bib at the bottom. And that second hose bib was not used during the school year. It was used during the summer when you could just put a low-cost, battery-operated irrigation system on that, and then hopefully the plants would survive through the summer, right? And most of the plants that were being planted were either food security plants or California native plants. But as you all know, that California native plants do need a couple of years of irrigation. So this, I know it doesn't look like much, but this was a very important detail. And then we also had to protect it from people who like to harvest copper, right? This is me in the field. I'm checking to make sure this Quercus agrifolia, that the root is the crown is at the right level, right? Prior to this photograph, about 2 weeks earlier, I was looking at the hole to make sure that the hole was scarified properly and that the tree, as it was delivered to the site, Maru, maybe you're the person who checked to make sure it wasn't root bound, because I don't have a memory of that. So yeah, and then another way to make sure that water's delivered to the plants are these gator bags, and they've been very helpful for SFUSD. And there's all the people making sure I'm doing my job right. And lastly, after doing all this work and learning quite a bit about little things, we're starting to consider, we need to, share our knowledge in this. All the little, all the stuff that people require, like the soil sampling, the specs for it, the checking for contaminated dirt, in what's called industrial hygiene. And then some of the details that we had to develop, because we learned that elementary school kids are really big these days. I had no idea, but some of them like to pick up the tree trunks and throw them. So we had to come up with something, and I love this bench because it's using black acacia from the urban forest, so we're recycling items that otherwise, really shouldn't be in our landscape, right? And then turning them into something that's beautiful and functional and serves as classroom seating. Another one that we really sweated on was an outdoor whiteboard that is weatherproof, right? Weatherized. And so we have so many details on that as well. And then lastly, I just want to thank everybody for being here and big thank you for all the sites that we were active in and that we've maintained relationships with. We still actually work quite a bit with Bishop O'Dowd. They're a lovely campus, and this is just an amazing landscape to be in as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We have about 12 minutes left for Q&A, but we did have a Berkeley Unified School District teacher here who wanted to just share a couple of slides. Would you like to come up? And then we'll take questions.
Yeah.
Is this it?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neelam Patil. I am a school teacher from Berkeley Unified School District. I'm a science teacher. This year, I was awarded Time Magazine's Innovative Teacher of the Year for my work teaching children that they can do something about climate change. And so what I'm going to present to you is a carbon sink forest, which it's called a Miyawaki forest. It's the method is Miyawaki method, and it involves indigenous plants in the area. So it's being practiced all around the world. But I was the one who spearheaded it here in the United States, and I planted the first 3 schoolyard forests in Berkeley, California. So Miyawaki forests grow 10 times faster than conventional forests. You can grow a 100-year-old forest in just 10 years. We have a biodiversity crisis, which is 1 million species on the verge of extinction in the next few decades. So this provides homes in schools that are designed to be human-centric and keep humans in and everyone else out, including animals and plants. They're 30 times more dense, so that means there's 3 to 5 native species per square meter. I'm going to blow through this presentation because I only have a couple minutes. I was sort of a last-minute add-on, but you can contact me later for more details. I'm not going to say everything, but one thing is they conserve water. We've cut back 75% on water consumption, and they heal the soil biology. So here are the layers of a forest. It's a multi-layered forest. Here's one in Australia. You can see on the this side, it's a control group. It's traditional monoculture planting. This is the Miyawaki method. These 2 plantations happen within a week of each other. This is a graph of the water cut from a lawn to our forest. And here's our case study in Berkeley. This is the site. It was an abandoned patch of rubble. Here it is on planting day.
What school?
Cragmont Elementary. We did 3 sites, and here it is 10 months later. Only 10 saplings have died, and there's 300 in there. It's 800 square feet. And so since these awards and this support, I have started a nonprofit. It's called Green Pocket Forests. And you can follow me on Instagram or Google it, and you'll get the website. And my goal is to bring these forests to schools and cities. I'm actually partnering with the city council person. She wants to fund 3 of them in Berkeley. They can fit, the beautiful thing is they're pocket forests, and they're dense, so they can fit inside of a city park. They can be shaped in the form of a leaf, or they can have sitting areas inside of them too. They can have pathways. So, those are my slides. I just wanted to share. What's your question?
My question is, I'm going to totally put you on the spot. What are the native species?
Oh, okay. And so there's 2 questions. What species are in the forest, and what's my name? My name is Neelam Patil, and if you Google Time Innovative Teachers, actually if you just go to this website, all the media, I've been on TV and in the paper a lot, but it's just in support of this work. And the victory was teaching children. The children said, the children did all the planting. It was me and 2,000 children at 3 schools, but they were the ones who did the planting. They took ownership, and these are dense forests, so it's very different from a school garden. Berkeley has a very strong school garden program. This is very different. This is in partnership with the sustainability department, replacing lawns in front of schools. And the children would say, that was the best day of my life. They named their plants. They sang happy birthday to their plants. They watched them grow. There's so much ownership, and they felt like even if it's 1%, I'm doing something to stop climate change. Because the teachers in this, who's a teacher here? The teachers in this room know that our students are already crying about climate change. They see it. So I just did this for the love of my own students because I wanted them to know they could do something. And the species, there's sage, there's Fremont cottonwood, there's maple, there's oak, there's 50 species in there. There's elderberry, coyote brush, willow. The arroyo willows are growing really fast. We did have an inventory issue, so we had to do it really last minute. We're doing another one in Berkeley in December, and we were able to custom order much farther ahead of time, so we have a different variety this time. Berkeley Technology Academy. On December 8th, we're planting our next Maidu forest, and hopefully we can replace a lawn near you soon.
So I'm opening up for questions for all 3 presenters that are here right now. And I'm so sorry that Rose had to take off, but yes, open for questions. And Carrie, did you have a question?
But I'll defer if someone has a question first. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Hi,
You want to take the mic?
Oh, sure. I shared that I'm in the North Bay. Rose is in the North Bay.
Yes.
Yesterday I saw a presentation about, reducing planting density because 3 to 4 of the most destructive fires of the last 3 to 5 years have happened in the North Bay. I'm curious on what you can speak to around density, implications for areas that have been so impacted by fire, given that we're being given the message of, defensible space and clearing that out, and just curious if the philosophy of this planting speaks to that at all.
Yeah, so that's like quite a long class, and we only have like a couple minutes, but I've spent a lot of time, probably over the last year, studying this. I have a teacher from India. This method is very popular in India. There's a guy named Shubhendu Sharma. He has a famous TED Talk called How to Plant a Forest in Your Backyard. It's magical. Watch it. You can take his training. He has a company called A Forest. I'm starting to offer trainings myself, so if you don't want to stay up and go somewhere 12 hours ahead of you, you can do that too. But I'm part of a worldwide network of people who have done these forests, and there's so many questions and a lot of skepticism about it. But what I'm being told and what's being said is that these forests create a self-sufficient ecosystem, and so the leaves that fall, actually, if you do it right, the humus, they create humus, and so it's instantly integrated into the soil. And so we're not supposed to blow the leaves away, and because the moisture of the forest floor is so great that it actually can, and the leaf density is so high. These are green leaves, not brown leaves. It can create a fire break. So it's actually being studied as a fire mitigation strategy. And that's a much longer conversation. But, they have a lot of afforest. This is actually called afforestation. And afforestation is the act of planting a forest where there was not one before. And some people are saying in San Diego, well, trees don't grow naturally in San Diego. How are you going to do it? Well, this is to address urban degradation and urban heat islands. So it's actually a progressive solution to address these issues. And A-Forest, the company, has a bunch of open source material. And again, sign up on my website, follow me on Instagram. My email is just neelampatil@berkeley.net. You can email me. I want to support this work. California has $150 million for schoolyard greening, and I want to plant a bunch of Miyawaki forests.
This is a question to all the speakers, but comes out of when we were asked to stand up in case we had a schoolyard garden. So maybe you can answer it. So my elementary school had one, and I never got to go inside. It was behind a chain link fence, and the gate remained locked, and I don't know why. And so I'm wondering if you see that occurring today, and how we can all prevent that from happening to current kids.
That's a fantastic question, and absolutely, I've seen it so many times. In fact, the start of this conversation with my 4 friends that we're talking, Arlene said, after they finished their planting pre-COVID of the conversion of the oak woodland to native plant garden, she said it was a wonderful garden. It was a kid's garden, and I haven't had the heart to go back, because all of COVID, they weren't allowed in. And so, yes, mostly I hear from community members who aren't allowed in, but yes, even on campuses, that's a huge issue. And so one of the things we do as a nonprofit is the empowerment piece is providing networking and advocacy. So garden educators can come to kind of events, and we share tips and tricks. And we share our strategies of protest. So, for example, the summer gap. We used to put combination locks on the school gates so that in the summer parents could come and help with that watering. Eventually, the district takes them off, and we just put them back on. I mean, we just kind of have to be persistent. But some other strategies are things like every school and district has what's called adjunct duty or extra duty, right? Teacher contracts infuse these extra kinds of things. So petitioning a principal to allow extra duty for 1 or 2 or 3 educators on the campus, because then you're accountable, like it's part of your contract, and so you're accountable to producing something with that. Just like you're on the literacy committee or the math committee, have the school garden committee be an adjunct duty, and then you develop those systems for like, when does a garden get open at the beginning of the day? Who's going to close it for security reasons? How do we share that duty so it's not one single person who's going to burn out or leave or whatever, right? Sharing some of those strategies, creating a schedule. So having scheduled times when you can go means that for reciprocity and sharing of space and accountability with your colleagues, right? Like your day to go is Wednesdays at whatever time, which means you as a teacher have to then plan it into your lesson. Like your week, you plan your lesson for that time. You can't just willy-nilly like, oh yeah, let's go to the garden, right? Like it has to be positioned as part of the curriculum. It's not just a free-for-all space. But then that comes with it is investing in the teacher training on like reducing the fear that like, if I take kids outside, it's going to be chaos, right? It's not actually. In fact, most kids are more well-behaved in garden spaces. I have never had a problem with a student who might otherwise exhibit some behavioral tendencies that are not as welcomed in the classroom setting, right? I'm trying to use really inclusive language here. We have an overabundance of identification of students with ADHD just because they have a different sensory input need, right? Like that's not necessarily a deficit, but if we create spaces where kids can be successful, then they're going to generalize that to the classroom. And then one more strategy, sorry, I know it's a long answer, but one more strategy is creating after-school clubs. So another component of the nonprofit is it's kind of a quasi program, direct service program, but also a research piece, which is I have a program after school called Dirt Girls. And it started as a way to maintain the garden so that I could at least ensure teachers would come use the curriculum that we had co-developed, because I was an employee of one of the schools for a little while. And so teachers can't be the ones doing the maintenance, though. They don't have the time for it, right? I've been a classroom teacher. I understand what that's like. And so if we could reduce the maintenance, well, I got 12 kids. You didn't have to be a girl to be in Dirt Girls. You could, identify as any gender, but the idea was that it was a safe space, and our sole purpose was caretaking of the garden. And they kind of became like the guardians. They would even tattle, like, so-and-so went in the garden. I'd be like, yeah, that's the point, right? That's a good thing. But what happened is it developed into something that we offered as an after-school club, for 5 or 6 week cycles several times a year. And I ended up having kids that joined in 2nd grade, and in 2020 we were graduating, or saying farewell on Zoom to 5th grade kids who had been in Dirt Girls since 2nd grade. That for some kids it was like there was something happening in this space where they felt freer to identify with their science curiosity and get barefoot in the compost pile or whatever. And those kids became representatives of the protocol and the accepted behavior in the garden. Like, this is what we do in the garden. We do this, not that, right? It's not recess. And so positioning in that way, and finding those sort of leaders within the school, any kind of after-school club. You mentioned the emotional turmoil. Eco-anxiety is actually like a real thing in the DVSM, like it's an identifiable condition now. So yes, we're teaching climate change. It's in the next generation science standards as early as 5th grade. So we need to have ways to mitigate that, to bring the joy back into, interacting with natural spaces. So I just appreciate the question, and I could talk all day about it. So thank you.
Hi. I'm just wondering if any of you know of any grants for or scholarships or something, some general financial support, no matter the chapter or region of California, that can be used to develop a native plant space or a natural space for learning for elementary school students. Because I've been thinking about going back to my old elementary school and maybe bringing some of my newfound enthusiasm and knowledge and trying to get something started there.
Can I take that one? Yeah, that's a really good question. I get this question a lot. I want a Maidu forest in my school. How do I do it? So the beautiful thing is CAL FIRE and the state of California just put out a $150 million schoolyard greening initiative. The best way is to partner with an already existing nonprofit and get a consultant. I'm happy to help you with that. I bet Carrie and Kat also would be happy to help you with that too. But you need to partner with folks, and there's some money out there for this kind of stuff right now. So, but you need the hardest part is getting the site and working with a school, because they're like, no, we need the whole area for children to run. But if you ask a child, the child will say, of course I want to give a home to nature. Of course I'll give half my playground to nature. So, yeah. But if the secret is waving some money in front of a school district and say, hey, I have $25,000 for this. And they'll say, yes.
Just to add something to that. We aren't necessarily, Maru and I, as Madrone Design Studio, aren't actually necessarily interested in it as a project. We are very happy to offer our knowledge. We actually just want to volunteer it. We're stepping away from it as a profit center and instead just trying to get the critical information in front of people. So feel free to reach out to us. At the end of this talk, I have tons of business cards I could just hand out. Happy to take information, but we're stepping away as consultants. But that doesn't mean we don't want the knowledge to get where it needs to be.
The woman in pink has been raising her. Yes, the woman in pink. Yeah, that's you. She's been very enthusiastically raising her hand.
Hi, I just wanted to just drop in an idea. Part of the what our little organization thought about climate change is that it's all subjects. So we're not talking only about STEM in education. We want to talk about the history, right? And the art. And art is not making pretty graphs for climate. Art is opening up us to envision a new world. So all of those subjects, every discipline that exists in humans can be used to make these gardens educational.
Right behind.
So I've done a lot of volunteering and coordinating in a school district. And I tried very, very hard to get a school remodel to include trees and ground and irrigation and plants. And I finally gave up because the bureaucratic forces arrayed against that are so huge. A school district's main goal in front of educating children is to not be sued. And they will not be sued for flat concrete and asphalt. They will be sued for trees and boulders and gardens and fences and stones and sticks that people will throw at each other or whatever, because kids are like that. So did you find a way to overcome that barrier? In particular, the groundskeeper for the district is the bar, the person who sets the fence, right? So it was very hard to work with that problem. I wondered if you had some ideas for that.
Who's your question for?
Whoever wishes to answer it.
Sure, I'll take.
Those are all really good points, and it's really interesting because we struggled through a couple of different sort of cultural issues with the program managers who we were directly working with. Some of them were very pro-nature play and didn't necessarily see the Green Schoolyard bond monies as anything other than nature play. So they fully supported that, and also the parents. And it's really key to have the teachers and the principal on board, which is one of the reasons why we did a lot of visual preference surveying to help with that. The bond was actually written with that in mind. But then later on, we ran into the culture of we can't get sued, right? And starting to finger point. And that was very, very difficult actually to navigate between that. So I feel your pain on that.
I'll add one other thing, which is, and this might speak to the question in the back too, is finding the back door, right? So find what's the initiative that the school district, pardon my French, like gives a shit about right now, right? So if it's school food, find the way to connect to school food, right? And that's what it is in my district right now. If it's social emotional health, find the funder who's funding social emotional stuff, and you say, oh, we're going to plant this garden that is providing this space, and oh, by the way, we're going to put all native plants in it, right? So finding that sort of back door and finding the way the community can be brought in. So another part of the story is that John Soper, one of the participants, just recently lost his wife she had first a battle with breast cancer and then brain tumors. And his late wife's first grade teaching partner is at a school that is an art integration school. And together right now, our current research project is we're bringing the community together to do this participatory process, which I will be tapping you about, is how do we find a space to communicate around a healing memorial garden? And then when you put it in those terms, how can the school district irrigation specialist say no to putting a grid system in? Oh yeah, well the food part, it's part of it, right? It's part of the whole garden design. So finding that sort of what do they want, and what schools want right now is to combat declining enrollment. And the one way they do that is they compete for the existing families. So you want your school grounds to look and feel like the place that parents want to bring their kids to. And then secondary to that is test scores. And so finding the hook for those two parts of the machinery, right, of what makes schools tick. But please consider also, if you want to use your voice, being that squeaky wheel at school board meetings, right? Like, oh, I noticed this thing happening, or like, one thing I hate is they cut the trees to look like outdoor coat racks, right? So that they don't have to blow the leaves. Well, yeah, of course, you're supposed to leave the leaves there, but nobody does that. They're trying to reduce their labor load by making these really poor decisions about how to treat nature, and then that's the model we're having kids experience on school, right? And literally the kids go and hug the trees because they feel bad. So finding that way to like put it in their terms, but please re-engage when you feel ready. Thank you for the work you've done so far.
Carrie, I want to add to that. I do want to give some hope. I think the best way is, at least what worked for me, was partnering with the sustainability department. Lots of school districts now have sustainability departments, and they really want to cut down on water expenditure. So replacing lawns is a really great way to get in the door. If you can show them, hey, I have a concept, cut back 75%. Like, they told me that they watered one of the lawns, just one lawn, 13,000 gallons a month. I'm collecting this data to show, so it's irrefutable. I mean, just that.
I think we've run out of time, but I'm going to be in the back, right at the end of the hallway right there, if people want to approach. And I want to thank everybody in the room and our two remaining speakers here. Thank you, everybody.